Caitlin Malashevsky, and this is my project in answering the question, does history repeat itself? So I first wanted to answer the question, why has the treatment of disease and sickness evolved or changed? And in doing so, I decided to research the Black Death and cholera, and then I compared them. So beginning with cholera, what is cholera? Cholera is an infectious disease that causes severe watery diarrhea and can lead to dehydration and even death if left untreated. It originates from the bacteria Vibrio cholerae, and Vibrio cholerae was actually first isolated and cultured by Robert Koch in Germany in 1883. And that actually led to the famous germ theory of disease. Vibrio cholerae is a comma-shaped gram-negative bacteria, and it originates from the egg found in zooplankton, or the egg sacs of zooplankton found in rivers and streams. And it can be grown in a laboratory at 37 degrees Celsius on blood agar and selective media like thiocitrate salt sucrose. There are many strains of Vibrio cholerae, but the most lethal ones that would cause epidemics are O1 and O139. And this bacteria actually releases a toxin that goes into the intestines, which causes which would be the agent causing the diarrhea and irritation there. The first pandemic or world occurred in Bengal, and it spread across India into the 1820s. It extended all over China, Indonesia, and the Caspian Sea. Some symptoms of cholera are mainly dehydration. Symptoms often show up about 5 days after the victim is infected. Some other symptoms, which would be more severe, like was it an epidemic or just like a severe case, would be diarrhea, which would be a lot, vomiting, and leg cramps. Cholera is contracted when an individual consumes food or drinking water contaminated by the Vibrio cholerae bacteria, and it is most prevalent in places with poor sanitation, crowding, or war. Cholera has affected many countries worldwide. The most recent and major outbreak occurred in 2014, and it impacted the countries of Cameroon, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ghana, Niger, and South Sudan, and those are just like a few of the main ones. So the treatments of cholera have evolved dramatically. During the 19th century, physicians thought that cholera was a locally produced miasmatic disease, which would be an illness brought about by a direct exposure to products of filth and decay. People believed that those who had inferior cultural practices were more likely to get cholera. So if they thought that they were more susceptible to it. Physicians also believed that cholera was not contagious, which it is. Families often were cared for in their homes, and lechery or bleeding or opium were also used, but upper classes used homeopathic methods, which would be like home remedies and whatnot, as well as they were very into promoting good hygiene and diet, which today the treatments of cholera include rehydration, so that would be, they have to do that by IV if they're so sick that they can't keep anything down. And they actually have a powder that they put in the IV bag that will increase the electrolyte count and help keep, them hydrated if they can't keep down solids. They will also treat them with antibiotics, which will kill the disease, and also zinc supplements help. So cholera has put a significant dent in the growth and development of countries over the past 3 centuries. Economically, why didn't I push this earlier? I'm sorry. Okay, economically, cholera has put restrictions on imports and exports, and those are often like super relied upon by those particular countries. So, like, for example, cholera cost Peru $770 million during their outbreak in 1991, due to trade embargoes and adverse effects on like tourism and whatnot. So culturally, cholera has caused panic and disruption in social order, as well as the opinion and relations with other countries. So next, moving on to the Black Death and some history behind that. The Black Death, also referred to as the pestilence, was a bacterial infection caused by the Yersinia pestis or bacteria, and it was most prevalent during the 14th century. So the first recorded story of the Black Death was on October of 1347, and it was kind of, documented that these 12 Genoese trading ships came in, and most of the sailors were dead, and the ones who were left were seriously ill. Y. pestis originates from the bite of either a rat or a flea. Most victims died within 7 days of getting infected, and the mortality rate was 90 to 95%. The first victims were a Russian man named Kutluk and his wife, and they were buried in an area around a lake in Russia. Many people believed that the plague was a punishment from God for their sins, or that the planets aligned and that the volcanoes would obviously give off an odor that was the plague, and yeah. So there are 3 strains of Y. pestis-based plagues: the bubonic plague, the septicemic plague, and the pneumonic plague. And the pneumonic plague the Black Plague, or the Black Death, is a form of the pneumonic plague. Okay, so some symptoms of the Black Death are fever, you can't keep down food, and you're in a lot of pain. Externally, you're covered in lots of black boils, which would make sense for the name. The symptoms and disease itself inspired the childhood nursery rhyme, Ring Around the Rosie. And in comparison to, for comparing the pneumonic to the bubonic, the pneumonic actually traveled 30 to 100 times faster than the bubonic plagues, and those were more prevalent in the 20th century. So the Black Death was passed through the air due to water droplets, so that'd be like sneezing or coughing, also by the infected rats and fleas. And the reason why it was so contagious and swept across at such a fast rate is because it wasn't just people passing it, it was also that second source, I guess you could say. So European countries suffered the most from the Black Death. So countries like Germany, France, England, Italy, Norway, Russia, and those are just a few of the very many that were greatly impacted. Treatments during the 14th century were actually quite erratic compared to the treatments we have now. When treating patients, doctors would often wear a leather bird mask that would have a long beak, and they'd fill the end of the beak with rose petals, so it would help get rid of the potent odor of the dying victims and the ones who were already gone. So some doctors also believe that if you spread feces and urine all over the victim's body, as well as scattered around the room, that it would drive the plague away. Bathing was also very discouraged during this time because they thought it would open the pores of the disease and it would spread quicker. The main cures included being happy, avoid eating fruit, put fragrant herbs into beverages. Avoid lechery, don't abuse the poor, and eat and drink in moderation. So, like, don't be guilty with that. Okay, so there are still treatments today for the Black Death because it has not been eliminated from our society. Why pestis still is a thing and whatnot. So Black Death is treated with antibiotics as well as rehydration methods, like I mentioned before, with cholera. The last major outbreak occurred in San Francisco in the 1900s, but it only resulted in 113 deaths, and that was the last record of fatal cases. So there's maybe like a handful of cases like every year in the United States, but none of them have been fatal like in the past century. So the Black Death has affected the growth of society in many aspects. Economically, it has put a damper in the import and export of goods as well as people for the production of those, because you can't produce things and make an economy boom if there aren't people to do so. Socially and culturally, there is an abundance of factors. The hate crimes such as against like Jews and lower incomes, they were massacred like probably a couple thousands during this time, because like people thought, like higher end people thought that it was their cause, and that like because they were gross and all this, not that they were like Jews are nice, but just saying they thought that they were like the cause of it. Let's see here. Something we adopted from the Black Death and the course of it would be the first quarantine, which took place in Dubrovnik, and that was while the Black Plague was going on. But the Black Death also influenced one of the first uses of biological warfare, and that would be there was like enemy villages, and one would throw infected plague victims into their cities if they were trying to conquer them, or they were like, you're stealing our deer, I don't know. So thousands of people actually did sacrifice their lives to help those who were sick, and none of them were actually recognized by the church, so like the Catholic Church, as saints or like blessed people. So that really changed the social and societal opinion on the church now and back, when this was going on. So in a larger setting, there was nearly 75 million people in Europe alone that were killed because of the Black Death, and the population took nearly 150 years to recover. So in answering my original question, why has the treatment of disease changed or evolved? I think it's for the betterment of society. Both cholera and the Black Death have taken quite a toll on the population, the economies of countries across the globe, and have seriously impacted social and cultural aspects of society. I think that evolving medicine and treatments thereof have helped sustain a consistent population and given people, hopefully, no matter where they live, a better quality of life. So finally, the big kahuna, does history repeat itself? And I think in this contest, I full-heartedly, and I do think it does repeat itself. There's always going to be people getting sick in like courses of different epidemics that span across the world. I mean, it's kind of inevitable, especially when people in like third world countries aren't getting the necessary care and vaccines and things that they should be getting, that more privileged people like us are. We do learn from our mistakes, though. Just because history does repeat itself doesn't mean that we're not learning from our mistakes, because our population would be completely diminished if we didn't, especially in the aspect of medicine and diseases. We know from our mistakes, like what treatments work for what, and the origin of disease and prevention and cures. And it's going to be a never-ending evolution, in my opinion. I think that it's going to be a constant cycle. So that is my project and my opinion in this context on does history repeat itself. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed.